Hey there, everybody. We're down in the woods, as I'm sure you can tell, and at my feet, you can see a few stumps from a beech that I've recently removed, and just behind me, you can see the stump from one of the eastern white pines. And I want to start off this video by saying that dropping trees is hands down the most dangerous thing that I do around the farm. And watching a few videos is no replacement for hands on instruction. So, if this is something you're planning to do, what I strongly, vociferously recommend is to seek out a forestry trainer or a lumber or timber felling school near you. So, as some of you may be familiar, we have a canopy dominated by eastern white pine, though we do have a few in number of various hardwoods such as hickory, oak, maple, and others. But the majority of our mid canopy is made up by beech trees, American beech, Fagus grandifolia. And those trees cast a very, very wide amount of shade because of the way that they spread their branches and have a lateral spread, and the deepness and additional layers of their leaf structure causes really long shadows. So, we'll show you a few of those characteristics and some of the things that we consider when we are taking them out or considering what to do with them. If part of your plan is to be removing trees, felling them, dropping them, the first point of consideration is to find your lane. And by lane, I mean a place where you can drop that tree safely all the way to the ground without getting caught in another tree, or being hung up in side branches or being shunted off to the side or in unpredictable ways as it leaves the canopy and heads towards the ground. While our forest is very tightly packed with tall trees, the species that gives us the most trouble or presents the greatest challenge for us to drop these pines safely is the beech due to their spreading nature and the reach that they have. As such, as we identify the pine trees that we're going to be dropping to the ground to remove the long shadow that they cast, one of our first steps is to identify which direction we're going to drop them and which of the trees will have to be removed underneath that drop lane for us to be doing this in the safest way possible. So we're going to walk past this one right here in order to come up on this one. And so from here, you can probably see the way that these branches overlap each other. And that is so this plant can get and collect as much sunlight as it possibly can. And this is just the layer right at eye level. There is another layer, and another layer, and another layer. And they branch out kind of in a swirling ladder sometimes, but you'll also find sets of branches very close to each other on the same side. If there is some kind of advantage to be gained from the tree's perspective, it will grow out to that point. And so I've actually got another one I'm going to show you over this way. Sometimes you get really gnarly ones, and the side branches are almost as tall as the tree itself if you were to stand them end to end. So that little leader right there where it terminates, all the way back to this one. And if we go up to this branch, this is some 12 feet out from the base of the tree. And so we're looking at a 30-ish foot spread of the side branches. And you can see that it's actually butting up against this snag that you can see going up to the top here. And while I value the ecosystem service that a stump like this provides, or a tree, a dead stand, a snag like this provides for the wildlife, it also has a number of branches still left on top. And as this tree decays and dies further and rots further, they will start falling. And if my intention is to broaden up the amount of available sunlight during the growing season, I know it looks really, really bright right now, but in the middle of the summer, when all of these beech trees are in full effect, it gets really dark. So if I want to bring more sunlight down here, I will have to remove some of these pine trees. And the only way to do that safely is to be picking and choosing some of the beeches to be removed prior to their felling. If, for example, I was going to drop this tree, the safest direction for it, one that will give me enough distance, let's pan all the way up. It's a 60 to 70 foot tall tree. I don't have 60 to 70 feet going off in this direction. You can see a number of trees that would make that incredibly difficult. And we have some that are growing just behind others, kind of peeking out here. And so if I was going to try and drop these trees in order to clear up space for this tree, I'd have to take out a huge number of them back there. Meanwhile, I have a space heading back. I'll move my hand so you can actually see it. But I have a space heading back where I had another tree that we dropped that was perfect. Dropped perfectly. But in order to drop this one, this and this should probably be removed. This one here should probably be removed. And you can see from here, I've already done a few of the cleanup cuts to make the working space safer. But there is another beech back here that I think should also be removed in order to drop this tree safest. Because if I lean it too far this way, I'm going to get caught up on this tree's branches. And so I need to aim it slightly further this direction, which will require removing these so that it doesn't bounce or take a weird roll off of the stump when I cut it. You don't have to remove the tree entirely. You could Pollard cut it, which will reduce the access that the deer or other animals have to it. You'll get a flush of new growth at the top of your cut. So there or there, you'll see the new growth starting there. If you're going to be cutting it low, you're still going to want to remove all of the branches to give yourself a clean workspace, to prevent the incidence of eye injury, and to make it easier for you to find the points where you are going to make alterations to that tree. If you're like us and have a feed them before they get there philosophy when it comes to the deer, a Pollard may not be the best decision for you. The goal for us is to provide as much forage, protein, and early season green fare for the deer so that by the time they make it up to the nursery space, they have had a good amount of the food that they are going through our property just to find. For those of you who would prefer to Pollard your trees, I'm going to zoom in and show you the branchwood collar and some of the things that you should be aware of before you begin cutting. So if we get in here, this portion of the tree right here, you should avoid cutting. You don't want to go right through here. It is better to come at a slight angle so that you avoid as much of this branch collar as you can. If you have too much weight on the end of the branch, as these would be, when you start to cut through the top of the wood, you'll create a pressure difference and you're more likely to get a bark tear, which will expose the cambium and present an opportunity for diseases or other pests to get into your tree. So if you're leaving them for a Pollard style taller cut, then really do your best to make a clean incision cut through. I always advocate for an undercut first to relieve some of that pressure. You only need to go about a third of the way up, maybe even less, depending on the thickness of the branch. But what an undercut will do is alleviate some of the likelihood of tearing, and you can get through the branch a little bit cleaner. So let's clean this up real quick, and then we'll go from there. You can see here one of the undercuts I've made on this branch. And again, we're trying to avoid this little bit right here where the tree turns into a branch. And sometimes, depending on how it goes, you may get kind of a callus around it. I don't know how well the camera picks that up. It doesn't seem like it does a very good job of it. It is a little bit more noticeable on this branch, I think, where you can see a little bit more of a callus and that branch collar. And so this little bit of an undercut is enough so that when I start cutting the top here, this will fold closed as the middle piece that is left and being reduced becomes the hinge for this branch. It's really hard to do it one-handed while holding a camera steady, so I'm not going to try. I've just made 2 more passes with the pruning saw, and you can see how the bottom has started to pinch closed while the top is starting to become more open. And so what'll happen is as this piece in the middle, the hinge, gets thinner and thinner, this will close and prevent the bark down here from tearing out because it's already been severed, so there's nothing to create that tension. So we'll get that. So if you do it pretty well, and there's a little bit of a disconnect right here where my saw didn't quite line up perfectly, but if you do it well enough, you'll get something like this a little bit further on, where it's just kind of it's sequestered that little bit of broken wood. If there was more sunlight coming into this spot, this branch would have regrown very handily, but we have a few that we've taken off like that. And so if you do it right and you leave the branch collar, it'll eventually close over that wound after partitioning it from the rest of the living wood that's inside the tree, and you can continue about your time if you are leaving the tree standing. Don't do your undercut, you'll end up with something like this. Where this tear out here makes it much more difficult for a tree that you're leaving to heal and compartmentalize this damage. So this becomes a spot for canker or rot, fungus, or other pests to become an issue for your tree. Luckily, this one's coming down completely, so I can use it as a demonstration for you. I'm mostly happy with this cut. The back cut was slightly uneven, but we did pretty well. The hinge stayed connected all the way to the end. And what I will do is come in and cut a flush cut very cleanly down below this so that it is slightly tilted with a little bit of an angle, just enough to run water off so that it's not sitting on the top in this part here pooling. If you do a very low cut, say if you were to come and do your face cut in here, there is not going to be very much left for you to cut off to make a clean if you are doing axe or hatchet cutting. You may, if you cut too far into the root crown, just end up killing the tree. But something like coming through and doing a mostly level cut with a little bit of a cant to shed water will make it so that this tree has a better chance of pushing new growth at a comfortable browse height for the deer that really do use this little bit of space back here and use it as a main thoroughfare. So that will be what I'm going to do here at the end of this video once I'm done with it. But let's take a look at one other set of ideas. We're in another section now, and all of these trees that you see are beech. And if I want to take advantage of the amount of sun that is coming over the pond behind you and have the greatest amount of it hitting this area here where we've planted additional plants besides the beech, then what I'm going to have to do is to either reduce their height or their spread or both to fully take advantage of the early seasonal sun that comes in over the pond. These trees, you'll notice, are considerably smaller than the ones that we were talking about before, and I can comfortably overlap my thumb and middle finger around this trunk. For trees of this size, the saw is probably a poor choice. I could have come in with a pair of loppers. The same eye safety rules apply, but if you are planning to leave these trees for deer browse, then you can just choose to cut just the ones at eye level, and you could opt to leave the remaining branches below where your flush cut is going to be. There is the option of removing the branches below your flush cut so that you can use them as structural devices for other plants, possibly a series of vining plants or other young trees or shrubs that will require some sort of support as they grow. So I still have to clean up the work site, but once you've made your cut that removes a lot of the top weight of everything, what you can do is try to come through and pick growth nodes. So where other branches have been recently, little growing tips. If you make your final flush cut just above these, what will happen is the growth hormones, the bits that push upward growth, are going to pool at the top here because they can't go any higher. There's nothing to send the signal back down to the roots saying we've got all we need. And so you're going to get a whole lot more growth at these points on your tree. And so I'll show you one more that I did yesterday to kind of really demonstrate this and what I expect to have growth like next year. And then that will be the end of this probably too long video. So here we have a beech that is kind of protected. It is on the northern side of the pond. The pond is 20 feet away. And so it gets some reflected sunlight back this direction. And it also is pretty protected from the northerly winds because of all the tree cover. But what we've done is just reduce this down to directly above only a handful of branches. And come spring, these, you can already see the new leaves forming buds, and this will sprout out at perfect walk up and munch height for deer. And these spears can be some of the earliest forage that they get down in the woods. So it feels really good to release this tree canopy to hopefully grow more back here and back here and back there and down there, but also to be feeding the deer so that the nursery up at the top of the hill is protected from their greatest hunger pangs, even though I know we have some of the really good juju that they're looking for up in our field. So, yeah. Coppice and Pollard agroforestry. Fun in the sun on a day at the beach. Hope you're all well. Till next time. Thanks for watching. Happy planting.